Ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the podcast. Listen, I'm excited for our next guest because she's a straight up boss. And most importantly, she's going to teach you the game today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Alisa Jacobs to the show. How are you doing today, fam?
Hello, I'm amazing. How are you?
Doing good. First off, I'm glad we made this happen. I seen you as somebody like not only just blowing up on Clubhouse, but the way that you are putting your words together, it's like people are just drawn into your voice. But before we get into, how you got that way, tell the audience right now that's listening a little bit about you. Like, take us back to the young Alisa growing up. Where are you from?
Sure. So I'm from Massachusetts. I was born and raised in a really small town outside of Boston by New Yorker parents, which is why I have totally non-regional dialect, because you grow up in a household of really thick Brooklyn accents and Boston. It's very confusing. You go right down the middle. But yeah, I went to Maryland for school. So I'm a very proud Terp, University of Maryland, College Park. And so I spent time in Boston, time in DC, Maryland, Virginia, really cut my teeth in networking and in building relationships and interning since I could spell intern. And then I lived in LA before. I lived in New York. I'm back in LA. So I've run the circuit a little bit, but I think that that starting point was really always rooted in fierce curiosity and wanting to learn about anything and everything, and a deep passion for people, like actually genuinely caring to hear people's stories. And I think when you talk about networking and relationship building, people always want strategy and tools, but the root of it is actually giving a shit. That's the life hack. The hack is actually asking questions you want to know the answers to, which I know you know as a podcaster.
Absolutely. And I think that also comes with practice and with reps, right? You mentioned, getting into internship before, you even knew how to spell it. How important was it for you? Because we have such a large audience that is constantly trying to figure out the education, constantly trying to figure out, all right, is this the right next steps for me in my career? Perhaps entrepreneurship is it. What would be your tips for somebody that's thinking about getting an internship?
Do all of them. Do all of them. You're talking to someone who's incredibly biased about internships. I think there's merit in being paid for your work, right? We all want to be valued and we all want to have microwave success. And especially this generation as a millennial and with Gen Z and everyone else, you want this right now, right now. You want everything you've ever dreamed. You want all the money, all of the clout, all of the status, all of the responsibility, until you have the responsibility with no knowledge. And I think that for me, I never looked at internships as giving up free labor. I looked at internships as getting free class. So while I also went to higher education, which some people do, some people don't, I really felt like if I was otherwise going to get my MBA or certificates or go to a conference, and someone is willing to allow me to cut my teeth on their dime, on their time, and have an immense amount of game, it's free game, right? At the end of the day, it is immersing and osmosis in free game. And so when you talk about internships, I had full-blown revenue generating companies before I was 10 years old. I have worked since I was 11, at least 3 jobs since I was 16. And my first internship was with Norma Kamali at 16 years old in New York, who is a fashion designer. Very Devil Wears Prada, but was an amazing experience. But at 16, I told my parents, I'm moving to New York for the summer, come or don't, but I'm doing it. And Mom wasn't super thrilled about it, but it was one of the best experiences I ever had. And it was really intense. I worked 50-hour weeks. I'm pretty sure it was illegal, but I learned so much. But here's what you learn in internships. Yes, you learn knowledge, and yes, you learn game, but you also learn what you don't want to do. So at that age, I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. And what I learned from a fashion designer was that I loved marketing and launch and brand building and communications and client services and being in the design room, but not actually, I liked to draw and I liked fashion. I didn't want to be a fashion designer. When I actually understood what they do and what was required of me and my personality to be successful in it, it wasn't for me. But it's also how I ended up choosing my college, an early decision, my major. And I worked in sports. I worked for what's now the Washington football team, at the time, the Redskins. I worked for the NFLPA, both unpaid and paid. I actually gave up my cocktail waitressing, very high paid job at the stadium to intern for free for the PR department. Mike Wilbon, who was a friend and mentor, and Pat Wixted, who was the youngest PR professional at any major football team, I believe, really taught me so much about the value of the relationships and exposure. Because that's the thing people forget about internships and apprenticeships. It's not just about doing the work, and it's not just about access, it's exposure. And I had a mentor once tell me, you're working with all these really cool agencies and startups, but if you're on a bad team in a random market as a basketball player, for example, because he was a sports agent, he was like, if you're in the Midwest on a losing team, no matter how good you are, you're not going to get seen. Whereas if you actually play for the A team, love it or hate it, you're going to be seen for whatever you're playing. And that was really a lot of what motivated me to apprentice, even when I had paying jobs, by the way. So I'm someone who has literally interned almost my entire life. So when I was in my 20s, even when I had full-time jobs, I was still doing special projects or collaborations or, frankly, free work to learn. And those things that I did between 21 and 26 are still things that pay in dividends today. Many years later, those relationships are some of the strongest, and there's so much value in that access, that exposure, and that sincerity of relationship, because there's no transaction. It's truly just a sharing of value.
You know what I like about this is that right now is you're giving a game on not only the importance of internship, but also what can happen, right? You talked about, getting on the A team. I think it's also important for our audience right now. One of your strengths that I've noticed is to keep a relationship and nurture it and further it for other things that are going to happen in the future. For the person that's listening to this right now, that's trying to figure out, okay, I took Alisa's advice, I can do this internship, or I can work
it's Alisa. I know it's Alisa.
Alisa, yeah. like for someone that's listening though, Alisa, like for someone that's listening that's saying that right now though, that they're saying, okay, I got it, I can get this internship. They want to master the relationship though and continue to build on it. What would be some of your your best words of advice to continue that relationship?
It's a great question. So I'm going to give you a two-part answer. I think that getting into the relationship is part one, right? And I think having fierce curiosity is something I speak to a lot. Intellectual curiosity, which is what I think formed my DNA and reputation, even as a bit of a polymath across a lot of different categories. Always being inquisitive, always asking why, always asking how, always being willing to learn and know that it's not always your boss or your client or the celebrity or the guru that's going to teach you. It might be another intern. It might be I got great life advice from the cleaning lady at Diageo. You know what I mean? Like You don't know where you are going to get knowledge. And so with curiosity comes a commitment to a lifetime of being a student and knowing that everyone is a teacher and having the humility to appreciate the lessons from those that aren't necessarily wearing the name card or the title. I think the other piece is having clear growth plans and agendas, because what you don't want to do is get into a relationship where you're just getting taken advantage of either, right? Like you also should be paid for your knowledge and your time and when you have something of value. So you don't want to be in an internship for 2 years unpaid, right?
Thanks.
So understanding what the mutual goal is, that there's expectations management and a plan in place, because there's always an ask and an offer. And one of the things I talk to people about a lot, and I do it on purpose just to make them uncomfortable, is what's your agenda? Because no one wants to answer that question. The very first thing I always say is, what's your agenda? And the reason is because people have it as this naughty word. It's very taboo. Agenda. It's malicious or negative connotation. An agenda is a diary, a calendar, a schedule in most etymology. An agenda is intention and purpose. So if you don't have something on your agenda, I actually trust you less than someone that tells me what their agenda is, whether I like it or not, because you don't have direction if you don't have an agenda. So really aligning on agenda and being okay with calling it an agenda. What do we want to accomplish? What are our shared goals? And how do we get there? And I think that's a big piece of it. And then also knowing that your first, second, and third job as an intern, as an assistant, as an apprentice, as anyone that is in a support function, is to make that person or that company's life or business easier. Where can you simplify, and where can you give them mental real estate back? And by mental real estate, I mean breathing room and the ability to wake up in the morning, have at least one less thing that is keeping them up at night and waking them up before their alarm clock. And when you can allow someone peace of mind and trust, then you will have a relationship with them for the rest of their lives. Because guess what? We have this completely manic approach to joy and success. As Americans, especially, and workaholics, especially, and entertainment industry, especially, but globally, we have this association with what happy or sad looks like, what good or bad looks like, what success or failure looks like. And it's just this pendulum swing of mania. And that's not real. What's real is peace. What's real is calm. So real success is when things are in flow and fluid and effective. And so if your job is to make their life easier, it's not just to perform. Because I've made that mistake before. I'm a very high performer and I do not need much sleep. So I used to think more is more. I work harder, not smarter. And I literally would have performance reviews or my boss would be like, do less. I don't have much to say besides file your admin more, because I never would prioritize the minutia, which is also incredibly important because it makes people feel safe. Like when you are, whether it's time cards or reporting, staying 10 steps ahead in communication, a client should never ask where something is. A boss should never ask where something is. You should always be ahead of that. And you should always be recapping and sharing those wins, because when we're on to the next one, no one else is thinking about whether you did a good job, a bad job. They're just moving on also. So you lose the opportunity to build your internal reputation and even your own repertoire and resume or portfolio if you're just like ignoring reporting. And I'm saying this humbly as someone that it took me into my 30s to actually appreciate ops and admin, and now running two companies, and one is an agency and one is a gaming collective.
Yeah.
And I actually recently divested quite a bit of my agency to my partner, who's an incredible partner as managing and operating and majority partner, to also focus more, because there's so much that comes with being the CEO and co-founder of a venture-backed startup. I think I have a friendly ghost. A venture-backed startup that is growing rapidly in a multi-billion-dollar industry like gaming, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to pull it full circle, but what I would say is twofold. One, the curiosity is really important, the ability to create peace and simplicity, and the ability to really communicate effectively in the terms that someone else needs. And then the focus piece, I've always had multiple jobs. And just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. I think it's great to have a diverse portfolio. I think it's important to demonstrate caliber and quality and competency across the board. But what I would tell my younger self is you don't have to do it all by yourself, all at once yesterday. And I sacrificed a lot, because for me, I'm like, but I'm getting the job done and I'm a high performer and I'm having wins. But I wasn't necessarily always taking care of myself or my health or my own needs or mental health or joy. I was working, right? And it's a lie that you can multitask. You can have rapid synapses between them very quickly, but you can't actually think and do multiple things at once. And so allowing yourself the grace to also focus at times, even if that focus is in this hour versus this day or this week or this month, it's micro focus. But that is where I think I really wish I learned that sooner, because I took such nobility in being team hustle, no sleep, working around the clock, being able to outpace everyone. It's at what cost, right?
Facts.
So that's the piece that I would really encourage, especially your younger listeners. It's okay to have help. It's okay to delegate. It's okay to lean on folks that are better at you than things, because you are going to be more effective, more efficient, and more lucrative with your time that is spent on what gives you energy versus what takes it away.
Facts. I mean, so many value bombs in that. I mean, protecting your energy is key, especially if you're listening to this right now. You're hearing it from her herself. Is that, yeah, you can do all these things. You can be this hustler, right? But at some point, you might get tired. How can you, rejuvenate and still be effective? So I'm so glad you touched on that point. There's somebody listening to this right now that is like, how did she become like the CEO and founder of a gaming company? Like, this sounds absolutely amazing, and they have an interest in that. What made you get into that particular field, and what have you learned, by being in it so far?
Such a great question, also. And a strange answer because I didn't get into it, it kind of came to me. Um, I've spent 15 years across a lot of categories. So I've worked in sports, music, fashion, entertainment, spirits, now gaming, CPG, health. Like I've really touched quite a few categories. And having been in partnerships and integrated marketing for so much of my career, in addition to innovation and brand launch, I also architected at the intersection. So there's very few categories I haven't at least touched or liaised because it's all about that intersectionality of culture. And it's that collision and that ecosystem. It's not the plus ones to the party. Like when I would do the Kith collaboration with Ronnie Feig and 1942 for Don Julio, for example, that was a couple of years of friendship and conversations in the making. And it culminated in one of the most disruptive New York Fashion Week invitations and really shape-shifted the course of even how presentation and how brands integrate in fashion. But that really started with seeing that spirits is selling celebration. It's not about liquor. It's not about what's the best tequila. It's also that. But it is about caliber and elevation and what is elite and what is aligned. And so figuring out where on brand really means shared values and shared audience or opportunity to vouch and recruit laterally is really where I've always thought through things. So for me, gaming wasn't let me go from spirits to gaming or from sports to gaming, right? It was gaming is culture. Gaming is culture because it's literally e-culture. It is electronic culture. It's the digitization of culture. Sports, music, fashion, performance. You have Burberry, YSL doing their fashion shows live streaming on Twitch. You can buy Gucci skins inside of Fortnite and other games. You have The Weeknd and Travis Scott and other innovators in music that are performing inside of games and metaverse. You see the blow up of NFTs, Clubhouse and beyond, of how and if you even think about NFTs though, right? Non-fungible tokens. I mean, analog NFT, wasn't that the Wu-Tang album? No? Wasn't
Absolutely,
that the
absolutely.
only 100 limited release that Nipsey Hussle did?
Yep.
You have to think that none of this is new. The idea of play, the idea of gamification, the idea of building community, sharing in an interest and something competitive or collaborative is what we've been doing in sports and music and fashion and every other aspect of culture for generations. And so for gaming, I looked at it as how do we expand the invitation and even the identity? Because I didn't consider myself a gamer anymore. I kind of peaked at Mario Kart and Mortal Kombat. And so I was like, because I'm not playing and live streaming every day, I don't count. I didn't feel like valid enough to even consider that. But if you play Candy Crush, my mom plays Wheel of Fortune on her iPad every day. She is a gamer, right? You don't have to necessarily be a sweaty basement gamer, first person shooter games, Call of Duty, you name it, all day, every day. It's the idea of digitally connecting to gamify an experience together, right? And so I got into it by accident. I had been studying it out of sheer interest because I saw it as the cusp of culture and where everything was moving very early on, about 5 years ago, and watched the evolution. A lot of my friends were involved in FaZe Clan and 100 Thieves and now XSET. And so it was on my radar when FaZe Clan was just a deck,
Wow.
right? And I remember trying so hard to get Diageo behind it for like Ciroc and Don Julio and all these brands. But at the time, it was really identified as like Call of Duty. And you can't liken violence with liquor, right? Or the racing games, right? You're not going to have like Grand Theft Auto, which is literally, a little PG-13 plus.
Definitely
Drinking and
PG-13
drive,
plus.
right? So they wasn't that they didn't understand it. It was that in alignment again, it was hard to find that match at the time because the other games felt very youth oriented. But when we did partnerships with Moschino and Jeremy Scott at a global level, with Ciroc even, Jeremy was doing collaborations with Moschino, dropping everything from Barbie to Sims over time, that nostalgia and that play, right?
Yeah.
And so what I would say is it started with sheer interest, A colleague of mine who was one of the folks that I worked with first at Diageo, where I led culture and partnerships for a lot of the multicultural and luxury brands, especially vodka and tequila, for 5 years, had moved over to Activision Blizzard. And out of sheer interest, I had kept in touch. He didn't know that I was retiring from corporate, as I like to say, or leaving Diageo. And he called me, and he was then, the CMO, and he was like, I need you to come talk to my team so that they understand the currency of cool, as I used to call it, and culture. Could you, wanted to basically have me do a paid workshop to program like a whole training session to teach this team how to make these kids relevant, right? These esports athletes, they were launching the Call of Duty League at the time. And it was literally the day before my last day. And I was like, sure, you can absolutely pay me to come give advice, or you can hire me to do it and by osmosis teach. And he was like, great idea. So ironically, Activision Blizzard Empire became one of my key clients when I launched Loop, a change agency, which is my marketing PR company with Antoinette Williams, who's been taking over as managing partner as we speak. And for, the next year and a half, my focus in a lot of ways was helping launch the Call of Duty League, work with the local 12 global markets, which each had their own teams and their own brands, how to integrate brands that were that disparate under one umbrella, as well as really make the talent more relevant and understandable to the broader community, bring in influencer marketing, experiential. We did things like hype battles and live from the war zone drops, and really just blur the lines of culture. It was with rappers and athletes and musicians, and mixing and mingling, because that commingling is the vouch, right? Mm-hmm. If you always just are the plus one to the party, as I said, you're still kind of like, can I put this here? Right? Do I take my shoes off?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so when you get to the point where you go in the fridge and get the water yourself, you actually have to be a part of the community. And so we really blurred those lines. And that was a big piece of it. And then when I reconnected with my business partner, Justin Giangrande, who at the time had launched Vayner Sports with Gary Vaynerchuk and AJ, and had his previous management company acquired, it was a really innocent conversation. We were talking about Juju Smith-Schuster and Quavo and Yachty and some of the folks he was working with, and whether there was crossover with Call of Duty and things we could do together. And I'll never forget, I was visiting my parents in Massachusetts, and I remember because I was folding something on a dresser, and I was looking in the mirror because my phone was on speaker. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror while he was talking, and I had this look of utter perplexity, what? Because he said, he just read this article, right? Did you know that 46% of gamers are women? Mind you, in less than a year, it's 48%. That number, revenue-wise, went from $156 billion industry, already double film and television globally, to $176.8 billion, on track for $190 billion by end of 2021 alone, $330 billion by end of 2025. It's the fastest growing multi-billion dollar multinational business in the world, and everything lives in it. It is the marketplace, it is the ecosystem, and it is the cultural relevancy that connects multi-generational consumers who have all of their purchasing power on their phones, on their computer. They download, they shop online. They're not the brick and mortar types, right?
Nope.
They may also be brick and mortar, but they're the most accessible for the quickest conversion for a consumer. And so I remember being like, yeah, bro, didn't you? Right? And I realized that there was two problems. One was that he didn't know that. The other was that I did. And nothing was being done. It just was an acceptance for me. I'd lived in the lion's den for so many years in sports and music and fashion. It's you're not well, why is the lion here? And it felt like the Jetsons. It felt like the 1950s in the future at the same time. And so when I went down the rabbit hole of why are we not representing them? Because he was like, well, where's the female FaZe Clan or the women's 100 Thieves? I'm like, how does that not exist? And that was our aha moment. And a couple months later, when he came back to me, I was originally considering CMO or advisor. I was not planning on uprooting my life and moving back across the country, 2,500 miles. And it really just evolved as an inevitability to found this together and to run it. And what I recognized was these women, they're not just underrepresented. They are so incredibly cyberbullied and it's misogynistic, it's racist, it's all these things, like anything, right? Like we've dealt with this in music, we've dealt with this in fashion, everything has gatekeepers. But to recognize that there was no one that was truly championing at a level that it could make a shape-shifting, seismic, cataclysmic difference in the industry in a shorter period of time. Not to say there's not champions in the space and indie groups and global, like people have been trying.
Absolutely.
But there was nothing accelerating it. And we had the fortune and misfortune of it being during the pandemic where we were the arms dealers in the war, right? Like the quarantine scenario accelerated and expedited and exacerbated what at-home gaming, PC, console, we're not even witnessing the wave of mobile gaming and casual gaming that's going to come out in the next couple of months at a massive level, which by the way is 82% women globally, which people don't realize for mobile gaming.
That's crazy. Yeah, you're about to crush
no one's talking to them.
Yeah, you're about to crush it. I think what's so unique about you and your story is that you have the ability to connect the dots and kind of see the blind spots that are right in front of us. And I cannot wait to see where you take this. And I'm excited for you. And I want to, I know we got a little bit of short of time here, but I want to make sure that our audience knows exactly like where to find you and where they can find out more of your wisdom, more of your knowledge, and kind of, go behind the scenes with you. Just give us all of your social media contact and where we can stay in touch with you.
Well, you can usually find me in his comment section, trolling and commenting and liking everything. My personal handle is at Ginger Jacobs. I know, incredibly original. At Ginger Jacobs on Instagram and at Alisa A. Jacobs on Twitter. But Queens is at Queens GG on all platforms. So QUEENS GG. It's also queens.gg for the website. If you want to get to know the 22 incredible, diverse athletes, esports gamers, cosplayers, crossover world champion athletes, musicians, influencers, models that are our roster. What Queens is a media management and merchandising company at its core. So we seek to be effectively the WWE of gaming, where it's a personality-driven content company and number one in the world, the company of the decade, especially for women. But we're launching our first merch collection on August 3rd, which I am over the moon excited about, which I will have to share more with you. But Miss Lon, who is an OG in streetwear, designed it with us, and we just shot the content. So my inner fashion designer as a child is actually like living out my dreams. And we have some really amazing content series on Twitch and on YouTube and amazing brand partnerships that are coming out. So very excited about that. And the women are just absolute fucking phenomena. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but they're fucking phenomenal.
You can.
If you dig into who they are, they're also economically included as equity partners. So they are shareholders. They are my business partners, our brand partners, that we are building them up, not just a pay to play. So we create this content. We have IP and brand studio and actually games that are in development for Roblox and other publishers. But it's a really special time for us and we're growing really fast. And last but not least, Loop, which is the marketing agency that I mentioned, is at Loop Says, and it's Loop Studios, LOOPSTUDIOS.com. But you can also just find me in his comments.
So listen, we appreciate you so much for being a part of this show, and I know so many people are going to be impacted, and thank you again. And for those of you that have been listening to us this entire time, always remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it. Hey, what's up, fam? Thanks for watching. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button. We'll see you next week here at School's Over Now What. And always remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it.